Hey guys, Basement Horrors here, and today I'm going to tell you a few stranger encounters. Number 1. My boyfriend and I have terrible eating habits. One night after a long Wolfenstein session, he was craving pizza. He wanted the greasiest, most heart-blocking pizza we could find. Luckily for him, there's a Pizza Hut down the road. He ordered it online, but as we're both stingy, we decided to pick it up instead of having to pay for a delivery fee. I waited in the car while he went inside to pick it up. Now, this Pizza Hut is situated in a parking lot of a strip mall, so one would assume it's a brightly lit, safe place. One would be incredibly mistaken. The parking lot was pitch black if you weren't right next to the restaurant. Usually this doesn't bother me, but that night there was something wrong with our order, and we needed to wait another half an hour to get it. I still stayed in the car because I assumed the pizza would be ready in like 5 minutes or something. I just decided to relax and jam to some CDs. A truck pulled in right next to my car. It was rusted and dented, but that's not uncommon in my redneck-infested town. It seemed the occupants were in the same situation as us. The driver ran in to get the order, and the passenger stayed behind. I tuned them out until the passenger started moving erratically. I looked over, and the man was clearly on something. His stringy hair was plastered to his forehead and trailed down the back of his worn denim vest. But what truly scared me was how he moved. He was talking to himself, non-stop babbling that I couldn't comprehend. His entire torso was bobbing up and down. I'm not usually so easy to frighten, but the entire situation just seemed wrong. I texted my boyfriend, pleading him to get back to the car, but he was adamant on getting his food. The man in the truck looked me dead in the eyes and gave me the most sinister grin I've ever seen. I quickly locked the car doors and scrambled to find the small knife I keep in my glove box. Now armed and alarmed, the man and I stared down at each other. Just as the truck door swung open, my boyfriend emerged from the restaurant, pizza in hand. Leave it to a theater nerd to know when to make an entrance. My boyfriend unlocked his door, and was about to slide in when the man confronted him. To my horror, the man's pants were wet in patches, and he gave my boyfriend the creepiest grin I've ever seen. "Usually I don't like the fat ones," he said, voice gravely and deep, "but I'll make an exception. How much for an hour?" I started to cry. My man straightened his back, and while a creepy truck guy easily towered over him, he gave his best intimidating glare. "More than your life is worth." After his moment of bravado, my boyfriend quickly slid into the car and peeled out of the parking lot. We weren't followed, but I was paranoid for the rest of the night. At least the pizza was good. Pizza creep? Let's not meet. Number 2. This is going to be a bit short, but I think it gives good information for encounters like the ones on here. I was 14 at the time, around 5'1" and 130 pounds. I was quite chubby. I had a mohawk at the time too. Living in Winnipeg in the St. Vital area, since I don't live there anymore, I will just specify the details. This happened on April 4th, 2015. I was home alone. I found the date because my stepmom and dad went to the Jets game, Winnipeg Jets versus Vancouver Canucks. My dad and I are from Vancouver. My younger stepbrothers were at their grandparents'. My stepmom wanted me to pick up some groceries for dinner that night, and since the store was near, it wasn't that bad of a trip. I walked over and went to the meat section since it was closer to the entrance, and then my list started with the meats. Now I'm gonna say I don't look cute or anything, especially with my mohawk, baby face, torn jeans, and ugly vest. But I guess I caught this guy's attention because I didn't have any parents with me. I saw him in the corner of my eye, looking around, then back at me. I walked away to the next few aisles, and I saw him again. He was Indian, thick, heavy accent, so I had a hard time understanding it when he tried to talk to me. We held a bit of conversation, and I'll try my best to recall what he said. "So, what are you buying? Are you gonna make dinner?" he asked. No, this is for my stepmom. She asked me to buy some things from here," I replied. "Oh, where is she? Are you here alone?" he asked. I felt my stomach drop slightly and my blood go to my feet. Those kind of questions had my sirens blaring in my head, and I knew that I had to get out of there. He tried talking to me some more, but with his accent and my poor hearing, I mumbled a sorry and have a nice day, looking for the rest of the foods on the list. I went aisle to aisle, looking and picking up foods, and each time I went to a new one, I saw him walking down the opposite of me. Once I passed him, he greeted a good morning, and I didn't reply. I cursed the store and myself for not being able to find a spatula. I was feeling sick by seeing this guy's face at every aisle. When I finally found the thing, I made my way to the fast checkout, the 15 items or less. Once I got there, I found him right beside me putting his foods on the belt. I wanted to tell the cashier, but he was beside me. What if he lied or tried to make a run for it? I wasn't sure what to do. Once she bagged my things, I walked in a fast pace to a second entrance that led to schools. Dakota Colgate High School and Victor Major. I went to Victor Major, and since school wasn't open, I hid behind a wall. I took off my hood and vest and put them in my bags, and let my rat tail down, trying to cover my shaved head the best I could. Since where I lived wasn't far, I walked home, hopped over the fence of my backyard, and greeted my sweet dogs. Lucky for me, he didn't come to my house, though I'm not sure if he tried to follow me either. Once I got inside, I tried to call my dad and stepmom. But I guess they must have still been at the game. Foolishly, I didn't try to call the police. So I stayed in the living room waiting for one of the dogs to start barking, the younger but bigger to begin as well. 2 hours later, they rushed home because they picked up when I tried again, explaining everything in tears. They called the police. My dad was even able to get a picture of the creep. I'll try to post it here, but my dad has gotten a new phone. The police didn't do much, honestly. We gave a picture. I had a written statement explaining everything. They just asked if he seemed unstable, if he had any disabilities. Now, I have autistic cousins, older uncles and such. I know when someone may have such a disability, or at least have some clue. I even met them down at the bus stop once or twice. That man was not disabled, and he knew he was talking to a kid, and asking questions a concerned adult wouldn't ask. At least not in that manner. The police didn't even give a notice to the school where this happened right beside. If you look on Google Maps or something, you can see that they're right next to each other. But since this happened 2 years before, I don't live in Winnipeg anymore, and I can't give any more, sadly. So anyone, please make sure your phone is on the highest setting if you can, as well as vibrate mode. And for people with kids finding themselves being stalked or followed, try to get into crowds or public areas. Find a safe place to hide, and take off layers if you can. Don't be afraid to talk to workers, like I was, because if you do, the creep can be dealt with. Number 3. So this happened 2 years ago in the summer. My friend and I go on walks at night. It was around 11, and we went on the main street of my small town. No cars were passing by, so the only lights we had were the lampposts, but they're kind of far apart. Anyways, we were right next to the funeral home, and me being me, trying to tease my friend, I said I wanted something scary to happen, because we were watching scary videos before we left. After I said that, I heard something in the tree that was next to the home. I looked up and saw someone all in black. But I just kept on walking, because I was too scared to actually say anything, and I was just hoping that whoever I saw didn't notice that I looked. While I was still walking, my friend stops right next to the tree and says, "Did you see that?" asking me if I saw what she did. After she said that, I started running and she ran after me. After that, we went to my house because we were too scared to walk around town anymore. When we got back to my house, we were home alone because my parents were always gone and my sisters already moved out. Since I lived on the edge of the town, there are just some old buildings that are behind my house, and they have lights that are on all the time. The town, of course, owns the buildings, but it's rare that they visit. We went into the kitchen and looked out the back door since it's one of those sliding glass doors. I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw the man again, and so did my friend. He was just standing there in the light of the old buildings. It was like he knew we were watching him. It seriously looked like something straight out of a horror movie. After what seemed like forever, I finally got the courage to turn off the kitchen light. I just told my friend that we were going upstairs to my room. I was so close to calling the police, but when we got up to my room and looked out the window, he wasn't in the backyard. We stayed up all night trying to see if the man would try to stalk us again, but nothing happened. To this day, I still mention it sometimes to my friend, and she gets mad and says not to talk about it. She always said it was my fault and that I jinxed it. I guess it really scared her because now she'd rather have me stay at her house when we have sleepovers. Number 4. So, after stalking around this page for a while, I thought I'd share my story. First of all, some background info. I'm starting college in the fall, and I'm a 5'2" female that looks 12. I'm also visually impaired, which all of these facts contribute to my uneasiness around males. My college offers a program for incoming freshmen to come live on campus and get to know it better for 2 weeks. So not knowing anyone and being visually impaired, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to make some friends and get to know the campus, so I went. I would later come to regret it. So continuing, the first week of camp went on without a hitch. I had a good roommate who actually will end up being my roommate in the fall. It was during this weekend that it all started, and me and my roommate got into the habit of relaxing in the evenings and playing cards on our floor lounge with our RA. Every now and then, other people would walk in and walk right back out. Until one night, a guy named Jack walks in and asks if he can join. And being the friendly people we are, we're like, sure. Now, other than a few weird comments, like basically telling RA he tried to get his social worker to buy him alcohol so we could make friends, we all kind of thought he was socially awkward. So now, the night comes and we decide to go play badminton outside. He just so happens to be out there alone, so we invite him to play. This is when his really weird behavior starts targeting me. Like I said before, I'm visually impaired, so I suck at sports, so I can barely hit the birdie for my life. He starts calling me names and physically tries to take the birdie and says, "Let me do it." Now at this point, you're thinking he's just a little weird. This is when it gets really bad. He becomes attached to me. He follows me to meals, to classes, sits next to me at meals, and even if I left early, he would physically run after me and catch up and walk to class with me. Okay, so at this point, thank God for my roommate, who stays right next to me, while he follows me around for the next 3 days, and I'm really sorry to her, because I used to be basically a wall between me and this guy. Anyway, this strange behavior persists, and eventually my RA catches that this is really freaking me out. It even starts freaking her out. So on the 3rd day of this, when he comes and plays cards with us again, with the same target verbal abuse towards me, then he does something totally weird and takes my roommate's water bottle and says to the RA, "What if I throw this metal water bottle out the window at somebody?" Keeping in mind, we're on the 3rd floor. We all just look at him funny, and he says, "I'm just kidding, I wouldn't do that." The thing is that he has one of those voices where you can't tell if he's joking or not. After that, we decide that we're done for the night, and we go our separate ways. Now comes the last night in the dorms at this point. After him following me again all day, I'm thoroughly freaked out. Not wanting to skip our nightly card game, we ask our RA if we could secretly play in her room, so we could finally get away from Jack. We're about 20 minutes into the game, and we hear him come down the corridor. Each individual room has its own key, but all the floors are opened by the same key. So even though boys are on one floor and girls are on another floor, he still had access to the girls' floor. So quickly and quietly, our RA goes up to the door, puts the towel underneath and a sticky note at the peephole, and locks the door. We hear Jack knock on our door right across the hall, in succession, each getting louder and more aggressive. Then after about 5 minutes, we hear him stomp back to the hall on the 2nd floor. I start having an anxiety attack and proceed to hide away behind my RA's desk in the corner. We continue to play another 20 minutes pass, and we hear him enter the hall again. This time it's on our RA's door. I'm shaking in the corner as we fall dead silent, with the succession of the knocks growing more aggressive. I'm so scared at this point, I'm wishing I had a knife. So my RA hands me a keychain with this heavy metal bar meant to be used as a weapon in desperate situations, just to calm me down. I know he's searching for me. This continues until 1 a.m., becoming more aggressive till he finally gives up. Feeling so scared, my RA lets me sleep in her room. So, moving on to the last day, he didn't approach me. He just sat across the room at every class and meal, glaring at me and saying nothing. Instead of running up to catch up with me, like usual, he stalks us from behind the rest of the day. Finally, I got to go home and get away from him. Unfortunately for me, I go back and fall, and I'm so scared. So, Jack's really, let's not meet again. Because, had I been in the room that night, I don't know what I would have done. Or what would have happened. If anything does happen in the fall, I'll update, but I'm really hoping that it doesn't. Just writing the story is making me nervous. P.S. Some of you may say, why didn't the RA do anything? But the simple reason was because it was a summer camp, and we were all adults, so the RAs had no authority, not to mention the RA was scared herself. Number 5. I used to ride the train to and from work. This happened on my second day of taking the train. I live at the very end of the line, and a couple of the stops before mine are not in the greatest areas. However, the last 2 to 3 stops are in great areas. Usually when I get to my stop, there aren't that many people on the train. On this day, there happened to be no one in my specific car on the train, so I was content sitting all by myself. As we stop at the worst possible stop in my line, a large man around early 30s and 6'2", with very wide and broad shoulders, long dreads, and a very large puffy jacket, gets on the train. I don't pay too much attention until he sits literally right next to me. An entire empty train, and this huge dude takes an entire seat, basically sits on top of me. He doesn't say anything, but he soon turns on some jazz music on his phone and held it up to his ear, which is right next to mine, blaring the music. I didn't want to be rude, although he was, so I decided to just act annoyed and hope he would get the hint. He didn't. As we near the final stop, each stop before then, he seems to be pushing into me more and more, pushing me against the window. Finally, my stop comes, and I'm relieved. However, he doesn't move. I look at him and say, "Excuse me," and he replies with, "Do you like this tune?" I say, "What?" And he says, "This tune, this jazz, do you like it?" I replied, "Oh yeah, it's great, but excuse me, I'd like to get off the train." He then proceeds to ask me where I'm going, again not moving. I tell him I'm getting off the train and would appreciate it if he'd let me. He still doesn't move. At this point, I start to get angry instead of scared. I have a temper and say, "Are you kidding me? Get out of the seat!" The look in his eye terrified me. They announced to the overhead speaker that the train will be out of service the rest of the night. At this point, the conductor starts walking through the cars to check them for sleeping people. The guy looks at me and says, "You're lucky this time. I wouldn't ride the train alone anymore, and I'll see you again. Don't you worry." We both get off the train and walk in opposite directions, but I make sure to keep looking behind me while I take my mace out of my purse. I then have to walk to a car ramp to my car when I see him watching me from across the street and start following me to the elevator. Luckily, there were a few other people on the elevator, and the door closed before he got there. I asked a couple of people who were getting off on my level if they wouldn't mind walking me to my car because there's a man following me. They did, and all was good. And I didn't see him again. I bought a taser the next day. Creepy train guy? Let's not meet. No, seriously, don't get on my train again. Number 6. Hi. I've just discovered this sub this evening, and instantly thought it would be a perfect place to share something that happened to me about 6 or 7 years ago. I've never told this story before. I was 15. I was not a popular kid, and whilst I had 3 or 4 good friends, I largely tended to be by myself. I was obviously gay, and it seemed that all the other kids knew about it far before I did. At this age, as far as I knew, I was straight. I apologize for starting off with something that ought to be a non-factor in 2016, but this becomes relevant later on. School finished ludicrously early for us, and our day was done at 2:30. Oh, to be young again. This meant that my friends and I would often walk home together. I lived about 45 minutes walk from the school, but it usually took us longer. My house was the furthest away from the school, which meant I would usually do the last 15 minutes or so of the journey alone. On Fridays, I routinely stayed behind after the bell. Art was my favorite subject, and my teacher would always stay around until 5 o'clock, planning lessons, marking work, etc. So I always was welcome to hang out around in her classroom and work on my art projects. In the winter months, and this 2.5 hours made the walk home a lot colder and gloomier. And by the time I'd get home, it would usually be dark. None of my other friends stayed behind on Fridays, so I would always have to walk home on my own. I grew up my whole life in the town, and walking home was no biggie. I knew my way around it like the back of my hand, and most of the journey was doable along the main road. It was pretty safe. I'd been walking for about 30 minutes when I first saw the man in the burgundy car. I'd stopped at a crossing to let a car onto the main road, and the burgundy car was immediately after it. However, while the car in front had behaved normally, there was something odd about the burgundy car. It slowed down considerably, even though nothing was coming, until it eventually stopped. After a couple of seconds, it pulled out onto the main road quite quickly and drove off in the direction I was heading. At this point, I didn't really pay much attention to the driver. I just knew that it was cold, slightly drizzling, and his indecisiveness was slowing me down. There was an Indian restaurant on the corner about 10 minutes from my house, with a four-way stop crossing beside it, with traffic lights, etc. As I was approaching the restaurant, I realized that the burgundy car was stopped at the traffic lights, now facing towards me. The lights changed and it pulled up beside me. He wound down his window and said, "Hello." I stopped and said hi back. He asked if he knew where my school was. Well, my school name was. He was very, very polite and well-spoken, quite pale, overweight, but friendly-looking. He had glasses perched on the end of his nose, with very thin auburny hair that was slicked back. I had placed him in his 60s or 70s, 50s or 60s. I did know what the school was, because it was my school. I was even wearing my uniform. There's only 3 schools in the area, each with different uniforms. Yes, I had explained to him that I went to the school, and that if he followed the main road along the high street and took a left, he would easily find it. He thanked me, and I soon realized that something wasn't quite right, because he didn't seem to be driving off. He was just looking at me. "You have a very familiar face," he said. "Perhaps I know your dad." In hindsight, I definitely made a mistake by giving him my name. But my dad was quite well known in the town, and I figured it was likely this guy was a friend of my dad. My father and I look very much alike. I gave him our surname, which is super uncommon, but he wasn't able to identify any of the family members. Then he said something which I can still hear in my mind. "It's my name, isn't it?" I remember being frozen for a few seconds. "Yes," I said finally. "Yes, I thought so. I can never forget such a handsome face." I should note that I really didn't feel threatened by the man at the time. I thought that we must have just had some mutual connections, since he already referenced my dad, and our town was pretty small. I was a pretty awkward kid, and I was used to situations where family friends would say, "I haven't seen you in for so long," and I'd have to pretend that I knew who they were. So I pretty much thought that this was another one of those moments. "Ah, I think I know you now," he had said. "Do I know you from one of the apps?" I didn't use any apps, as my phone was an old Sony Ericsson model. "Is it Grindr?" he asked. I told him no. I had never heard of it, and it was at that point that I really got alarm bells, because it became obvious that I didn't know this man at all. "I'm on a few forums," I said, and explained that I don't have any picture on the internet. So he wouldn't have seen me online. I didn't even have Facebook at the time. I remember him looking a mixture of disappointed and frustrated as he finally broke eye contact with me and looked off down the road. "So the school is that way?" he asked, and I said yes. "Do you think you could show me? I'll give you a lift home," he asked. Now I was panicking. I might have been naive for most of the encounter, but this was more than enough for me to realize that I had to get away. "No, sorry," I said. "I'm already late. It's literally just straight down, and then turn left at shop name." He gave me a look that I'll never forget, touted it, and drove off at speed. I made the rest of the walk home quicker than I'd ever done before, constantly looking over my shoulder. I was paranoid that he might follow me. I didn't mention anything to my mom when I got home. The whole ordeal had taken a minute or two. But I went straight on my computer and Googled Grindr app, curious as to where the man had thought he'd seen me. Naturally, I discovered Grindr, and felt sick to my stomach at the implications of what I read. Now obviously, I'd been very lucky that no harm had come to me, but I spent a very long time scared that I would encounter the man in the burgundy car again. So much so that I stopped going to my extra art classes and refused to walk home alone. Even today, I can't bring myself to download Grindr or use other apps, which puts me at quite a disadvantage where my love life is concerned. And even though I'm long since left the town and moved to a big city, I still sometimes find myself doing a double take when I see a burgundy car. I think a lot of the reason it still haunts me from time to time is that there were so many unanswered questions. How did he know my name? Did he really recognize me, or was that just a lure? Had he actually seen a profile of me on an app like Grindr? And if so, how did it get there? All I know is that the more I think about the encounter, the more sinister it seems to me. So, man in that burgundy car, let's not meet. Hey guys, Basement Horrors here. I hope you enjoyed this video. All these stranger encounters are really strange. Anyway, if you did enjoy the video, tell me in the comments. Also like this video. And check out my last video. I worked really hard on it. And if you really like my channel and you watched every other video, feel free to click on one of the suggestions. If you have already seen Smile Pug, then click on the bottom suggestion, which will lead you to my second channel, Slightly Disturbed Studios, where I don't tell horror stories, but personal life stories of my childhood and current life stories. So, if you like that sort of thing, make sure to check that out. And until next time, have a horrific day.